He was just a boy, but his escape became a mystery that no one could solve. In a small town where everyone knew each other, no one knew what had happened to him. What led this boy to hide from justice itself? The truth is more surprising than you imagine. It was an ordinary morning in a quiet town in the United States, but for Michael, it would be the last time he would see his parents. The boy, only 12 years old, had been raised in a simple but loving home. His hard-working and dedicated parents never imagined that one day their son would be capable of something so shocking. But what happened was unexpected. Michael was known for his intelligence, but also for his withdrawn behavior. He had always been reserved, preferring the company of books to mingling with other children. His curious gaze and silent steps made him an enigma to those around him. Little did they know that, behind his quiet facade, he kept a secret that no one could imagine. It was a Friday when Michael's world collapsed. He had been called to school for a meeting with his parents. Neither of them knew, but the reason was serious. The police had found evidence that Michael might be involved in a major scheme to traffic confidential information, a case that involved far more than he could explain. Everything indicated that he had become involved in something bigger than anyone could have predicted. When he arrived home, his parents were visibly shaken. The worried expression on his mother's face said it all. The boy, feeling the pressure mounting, tried to deny any involvement, but the evidence was irrefutable. The police were on their way, and his mother advised him to leave immediately. "Run, Michael, just run," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears, and that's what he did. With a racing heart and growing panic, Michael fled through the back door without looking back. He knew he could no longer trust anyone, not even the parents who had always loved him. What no one knew was that, as he ran for freedom, he carried more than the weight of guilt. He carried a dark truth that could change everything. What would you do if you were Michael? Would you run away or face the consequences? Leave your opinion in the comments. Michael fled into the cold city streets, his legs still trembling from the tension of the moment. The city where he was born and raised now seemed strange, as if he had been expelled from a world that had once seemed safe. He never imagined something like this could happen. During his escape, he passed through places he knew well. The old bakery at the end of the street, the square where he played football with his friends. Each step now felt like a final farewell, as if he were cutting all the ties that connected him to that place. Michael's eyes were fixed on the road ahead, but his mind couldn't focus. He thought of his mother, who would never have imagined her son capable of something so terrible. But did she know more than she let on? She seemed so calm, so composed, as she guided him to escape. What if she had been an accomplice? Michael remembered an incident last year when his father had received a mysterious call in the middle of the night. He'd gone out to talk to someone on the street, and Michael never knew who was on the other end of the line. But with time, he would forget that detail. Until now. But who could be the real culprit? Who was behind all this mess? Michael knew that somehow he was being used, but by whom and why? He had no answers, only doubts, fears, and a growing feeling that the fate of his life was being decided by forces beyond his control. He needed answers, but he knew that no one could help him. Not now. The city, which had once seemed a safe and familiar place, was now uncharted territory. Every shadow, every unfamiliar face seemed to hide a threat. Someone who could turn him into the police, or even worse, someone who was watching him. Michael knew he needed to hide, and quickly. That's when he found an abandoned house, a small refuge, far from the prying eyes of the city. But this house was no ordinary place. It carried its own history of mystery and abandonment. In his youth, Michael had heard stories about this house. They said it was haunted, and that no one who lived there for long ever remained sane. However, for Michael, it seemed to be the only option. Inside, the air was heavy and stuffy, and the smell of mold permeated the entire space. It was a place forgotten by time, but it was there that he would hide. He sat in the corner of an empty room, his eyes fixed on the old wall clock that made a monotonous and constant ticking. Michael's only company was the sound of his own heart beating rapidly. It was there, in that moment of solitude, that he began to reflect on his life and everything that had happened. What were his family's real intentions? Who was behind it all? And most importantly, would he be able to discover the truth before it was too late? As the hours passed, Michael felt the weight of the decision he had made. Running away wouldn't solve the problems he was facing. But he knew that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't go back to what he once called home. The city was no longer the same, and he was no longer the same person. Do you think Michael will be able to find out the truth about what happened? What would you do if you were in his place? As Michael spent his days in the abandoned house, the feeling of being hunted only intensified. Every sound seemed to bring him closer to capture. He knew that sooner or later the police would come after him. The city, once familiar and peaceful, had now become a merciless jungle. Fear consumed him, but something inside him also drove him to seek answers. It was a grey morning when he decided he could no longer live in the dark. The boy needed to understand what was happening, to find out who had put him in this nightmare. He knew that if he stayed in the house, time would betray him, and he would soon be found. But if he went out in search of the truth, he risked being captured at any moment. The dilemma tormented him, and there was no more postponing it. Something told him that the key to unraveling the mystery was in the city, in the place he had fled from. Determined, Michael disguised himself in ordinary clothes, trying to be as invisible as possible, and went to the city centre. The place seemed even stranger now, with deserted streets and closed shops. He walked quickly, head down, looking around, suspicious of everyone who passed him. If a familiar face saw him, it would be the end. He needed to be careful. Michael felt that the answers were within reach. But what he didn't know was that the past was beginning to catch up with him too. Upon arriving at the central square, he spotted an old friend, James, whom he hadn't seen in years. James had always been one of those neighborhood kids, someone who cared about Michael, but also about what was happening around him. When the two met, James looked at him with a confused expression, as if trying to understand what Michael was doing there. "Michael, what's going on? You disappeared out of nowhere and the whole town is talking about you," James said, unable to hide the concern in his voice. Michael hesitated. He knew James couldn't be trusted, but he also knew it was risky to keep everything a secret. Perhaps it was time to share his burden. So hesitantly, he revealed what he knew, omitting some details, but telling the basics. "Someone involved me in this, James. I don't know who, but I'm sure I was manipulated." James remained silent for a long time, staring at the floor, as if pondering what to hear. Then finally he said, "Michael, I don't know what you're involved in, but you need to know something. Your father, he was involved in something much bigger than it seemed. This isn't just about you." James's revelation hit Michael like a punch to the gut. His father, the man who had always taught him to be honest and upright, was at the center of something so dark. How was this possible? Michael began to wonder if everything he knew about his family was being deconstructed. Why had his father never spoken about this? What was he hiding? The shock was so great that Michael barely noticed a police car approaching. He heard the siren from afar, but when he looked back, the scene was already unfolding before him. Red lights flashed, and the car doors opened, bringing 2 police officers toward him. He knew he was wanted, but he couldn't simply be captured now. Something wasn't right, and he needed to understand what. "Michael, they're after you. They know more than you think," James said, his voice trembling, but the warning was clear. "You have to run. Now." Panic gripped Michael. James's words echoed in his mind, but the urgency of the situation made him act on instinct. Without further hesitation, he turned and ran through the deserted city streets, with the police just a few meters behind him. He didn't know where he was going, But he needed to get out of there. As the sirens faded into the distance, he felt the weight of the secret he was beginning to understand. What he had discovered so far was only the tip of the iceberg. His escape wasn't about escaping a mistake, but something much bigger and darker. He knew the truth was within reach, but would he be able to unravel the whole mystery before it was too late? Do you think Michael can trust James? What would you do if you were in his position, knowing the police are so close? Michael no longer knew who to trust. James's words echoed in his mind, but fear prevented him from fully surrendering to the idea that his father was involved in something so big and dangerous. At the same time, there was something strange about James's behavior. He seemed overly concerned about the situation, but it wasn't genuine concern. There was a tension in the air, as if he were hiding something. Michael sensed that something wasn't right, but what could he do? He needed answers. As he fled, Michael stumbled upon a part of the city he had never explored before. The streets, dark and deserted, seemed more distant and dangerous than ever. He knew he couldn't stay there for long, but something was calling to him. He approached an old library on the edge of town, a place that seemed as out of place as he felt at that moment. Inside the library, the atmosphere was quiet, with the smell of aged books in the air. Michael didn't quite know what he was looking for, but he knew he needed to find something, perhaps answers, perhaps clues. He wandered the aisles, passing shelves filled with books on history, politics, and even conspiracy theories. It was as if that library had been created to hide secrets. He picked up a random book about the United States justice system and flipped through the pages without really absorbing the content. His thoughts were in turmoil. That's when he found something interesting, an old file on a side table covered in a layer of dust. He carefully opened it and began to read the papers inside. They spoke of a secret investigation, something related to the government, and a series of mysterious disappearances. At the bottom of one of the pages, a photo caught his attention. In it, his father appeared alongside figures he never imagined he would see. The names of those involved were redacted, but his father's face was clear. What did this mean? Just as Michael was trying to process what he had just discovered, he heard footsteps behind him. Someone was in the library. He quickly closed the file and hid behind a shelf, his heart pounding in his chest. He wondered if he would be caught again, or if he would finally have the chance to uncover the whole truth. Across the room, a mysterious figure entered the library. It was a woman, whom Michael immediately recognized as an FBI agent. He had seen her a few times in news reports about complex investigations and cases. She seemed to be searching for something or someone. Michael remained silent, waiting for her to leave. But what did she want? He couldn't understand. "You shouldn't be here, Michael," the woman said with a menacing calm, as if she already knew of his presence. "We knew you were coming, but it's too late to try to escape." Those words froze him. How did she know his name? Who was she? Fear paralyzed him, but adrenaline took over his body. He needed to get out of there, and fast. As the woman approached, Michael noticed she was holding a file, the same file he had found on the table. "You think you can escape, but the truth is more dangerous than you imagine," she said without looking directly at him. She seemed to be speaking to someone, as if the file itself were a presence. Those words, more enigmatic than ever, left Michael with more questions than answers. It was as if the mystery was deepening, with each piece of the puzzle revealing even more layers. Who was really behind all this? And what role did his father play in this dark game? The answers were further away than he imagined, but something inside him told him he was closer to the truth than ever before. What do you think the FBI agent knows about Michael? Is she his friend or his enemy? What would you do if you were in his place? Michael knew he couldn't stay any longer in that library, or anywhere else where he could be easily found. The FBI agent's presence made him feel like a mouse trapped in a mousetrap with no way out. He needed a plan, and fast. The feeling of being surrounded by shadows, by people who knew more about his life than he did, terrified him. But he could no longer run from the truth, even if that truth was terrifying. The FBI agent maintained that distant, almost mechanical look. She wasn't just an investigator. She was involved in something bigger, deeper. Michael could feel it in every word she spoke. He tried to hide even further behind the shelves, but it was no use anymore. She knew exactly where he was. "You can't run away, Michael," she repeated, this time more emphatically. "Everything you're doing is only bringing you closer to the truth, but it's also putting you at a crossroads from which you won't be able to escape." His heart racing, Michael took a step forward, more out of instinct than courage. The woman noticed his movement and, with a calmness bordering on the absurd, closed the book in her hands and looked directly at him. "I knew you'd come looking for this information. Your father was a dangerous man, Michael. And you're beginning to understand what that means, aren't you?" Her words landed like a bomb, but Michael couldn't afford to hesitate. His mind raced, trying to find a way out, a way to reverse the situation. "What are you saying?" he asked, feeling the tension gripping his body. She took a deep breath, as if she had finally decided to speak. "Your father was involved in a secret operation, Michael. He knew what he was doing and he knew the consequences, but you have no idea what's going on here. This is much bigger than you imagine." The FBI agent placed the file on the table and slowly opened it, revealing more documents, photos, and names. Michael stared in disbelief. There, amidst the papers, he saw something he never would have imagined, a document with his own name on it, dated weeks before his escape. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. "The truth is simple, Michael," she said, looking intently at him. "You're at the center of a web of lies. Your father wasn't the man you thought he was. He was helping to cover up a government scandal that could destroy lives. And you, by accident or perhaps by choice, were drawn into it all." Michael felt the world around him crumble. What he had heard from James, what he had read in the library, now made perfect sense. His father wasn't just involved in something big, he was a key player. But why had he never told Michael? What was his father's real role in this story? As the agent spoke, Michael felt a growing anger. He was being used as a pawn in a much larger power game, and now the pieces were falling into place in a cruel way. The truth, which he had sought for so long, was before him. But it was more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. His father had been a figure of authority and respect, but the truth revealed a completely different man. "You have two options," the agent said, interrupting his thoughts. "You can keep running and try to escape, but know that with every step you take, the consequences will intensify. Or you can help put an end to all of this. We know you have the answers, Michael, and we need you to help us dismantle what your father started." Michael looked at the file again. His fingers trembled as he touched the pages, seeing the connections that involved his father. Each new name, each document, was a piece of the puzzle he wasn't yet ready to accept. He knew he had reached the point of no return, but what would he do now? Could he help the authorities and reveal everything he knew, or follow his own path, trying to understand what his father had really done? The decision rested on him. The revelation of the truth was closer than ever, but the consequences of that truth could be catastrophic. He felt a growing strength within him, a need to understand what had happened, but also a desire to protect those who were still involved. The weight of the choice was immense. What would he do with this truth? Now that the truth has come out, do you think Michael should help the FBI or continue his escape, trying to protect himself and his family? What would you do? Michael felt the weight of the decision crushing his shoulders. The FBI agent stood before him, awaiting an answer. Her words still echoed in his mind. You can keep running, or you can help end all of this. But what did end really mean? He knew that by making any decision, he would be changing not only his life, but also the lives of everyone around him. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. He looked at the papers on the table and felt immense pressure on his chest. How could he suddenly become involved in such a huge government scandal? His mind was confused, fear beginning to transform into something darker, a feeling of powerlessness. Michael knew that, whatever his choice, his life would never be the same again. He had only one chance to decide, and with it, his truth would finally be revealed. "You have to decide, Michael," the agent insisted, watching him intently. She seemed impatient, but also aware of the magnitude of the choice he would have to make. The feeling of being at the center of a gigantic plot consumed him. Everything he knew up to that moment was crumbling. He wondered, did I really know my father, or was he just another pawn in a dirty game that no one else could understand? Michael stepped away from the table, his thoughts turbulent. He knew he couldn't keep running away forever. Something was deeply wrong with this situation, and the only way to fully understand what was happening was to confront the truth. But something inside him prevented him from simply accepting what he had just discovered. How could someone so close to him have become involved in something so destructive? He felt the weight of distrust settling between him and the FBI agent. Is she really who she says she is? He was beginning to wonder if she didn't have her own motivations, perhaps not as noble as they seemed. She had spoken as if she knew what he should do, as if he were just another pawn in a story that was already written. But Michael could no longer be caught in this web. He needed to act on his own. "I don't know what you want from me," Michael said, his voice trembling but full of renewed determination. "I'm not a government agent. I'm not a hero. I'm just a kid trying to understand what's going on, but I know I can't trust anyone right now, not even you." The agent looked at him for a long moment, expressionless, as if she had anticipated this reaction. "Michael, I understand your hesitation, but you're mistaken if you think you have another option. The truth is, your father made choices that directly affect you. You're part of it, in a way you don't yet understand." The shock of her words nearly paralyzed her. Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wasn't prepared to hear that. He didn't want to hear it. All he wanted was to run away again, disappear and find some kind of peace. But somewhere deep inside, he knew that running away wasn't an option, not anymore. That's when he felt a familiar presence approaching. He looked at the door and saw James, the friend he thought he had lost forever. James rushed in, a look of worry and fear in his eyes. "Michael," he said, his voice hoarse. "I couldn't stay home. I needed to see you. Is everything all right?" Michael felt a mixture of relief and distrust. He didn't know if he could fully trust James, but at that moment, he was the only person he could rely on. James, seeing the FBI agent, approached cautiously. "Who is she? What's going on?" Before Michael could respond, the agent interrupted with a menacing calm. "Is this the friend you're so protective of, Michael? He's not here to help you. He's part of the problem, just like you." Her words hit him like a blow. Michael looked at James, searching for answers. What was happening? James didn't seem like a villain, but if he was somehow involved, what did that mean for their loyalty? The situation was rapidly shifting, and now, more than ever, he wondered, is it possible to discover the truth without destroying everything I know? James, with a frustrated look, glanced at Michael and, in a sincere tone, said, "I don't know everything, but what I can guarantee you is that I'm not your enemy. And if you think I am, then you'll have to decide for yourself." "But you still have a choice, Michael. I believe that." Michael remained silent, looking at James, then at the FBI agent. He was surrounded by secrets, lies, and perhaps even betrayals. The truth was further away than he imagined, but the final decision depended on him. Do you believe James is telling the truth, or does he have something to hide? Should Michael trust him or go it alone? What would you do in his place? Michael was on edge. Every decision he made seemed to push him deeper into an abyss of uncertainty. James's presence and the FBI agent's constant surveillance made him feel like he was being watched every step of the way. But inside, Something was beginning to change. He could no longer be the boy who ran away from everything. The truth surrounding him needed to be confronted, and he had no choice but to accept his part in this game of shadows. James seemed sincere, and his presence once again made him question whether he was truly alone in this. Michael knew his friend had secrets, perhaps as deep as his own. But at that moment, loyalty seemed to be the only thing that could save him. If he were to trust anyone, it would have to be James, but the truth was still a slippery road, full of unexpected twists and turns. "Michael," James said, his voice firm, as if trying to encourage him. "I know you're lost, but we have a chance to do the right thing. We need to stop running and start acting." Michael looked at James, trying to find some clue in his gaze, but all he saw was determination. The same kind of determination he felt forming within himself, a silent but growing force that made him want to understand what was really happening. He couldn't run anymore. He needed to understand what his father had done and the role he had unwittingly played in this plot. "You're right," Michael replied, a different weight in his voice. "I can't run from this anymore. I need to know the truth, no matter how ugly it is." With this new understanding, Michael stood up, determined to stop reacting and start taking control of his life again. He knew that the truth could destroy the image he had of his family, but that couldn't be more important than finding meaning in it all. The FBI agent, who had been observing in silence until then, finally spoke. "Now you're beginning to understand. The truth was never about what you wanted to hear, but about what you needed to know." She stepped forward, showing no emotion, but with a confidence that seemed unwavering. "Your father was involved in something that could cost you far more than your freedom. He knew that you would somehow be dragged into it. Perhaps it was an attempt to protect you, but in doing so, he set you on a path from which it will be difficult to return." Michael took a deep breath. With each word the agent spoke, he felt a weight being lifted from his shoulders. He knew his father had tried to protect him, but the truth was even crueler. Now, he needed to accept the pain of understanding what was happening and take responsibility for it. He could no longer be the victim of a situation that had already spiraled out of control. The only way to overcome what lay before him was to act, even if it meant confronting his own fears and uncertainties. "I don't want to be the hero," Michael said, more to himself than to others. "I just want to understand what happened and what I can do to right what my father did." James stepped forward, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. Together, we can uncover the truth, no matter what happens next." Michael felt a wave of gratitude, but also of frustration. He knew he couldn't control what was to come, but at least he wouldn't be another pawn of fate. He would choose the path of truth, however painful it might be. What his father had done was no longer the center of his life. The center now was the freedom to act, to make his own choices. With this newfound sense of control, Michael felt a transformation within himself. He was no longer a boy running from his own destiny. Now he was someone determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it led him. "I'll go with you to the end, Michael," James said. "But remember, the truth has a price. What you discover could change everything." Michael looked at his friend, feeling a mixture of fear and courage. He knew the journey was only beginning, and that there were still many obstacles ahead. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face them. "Do you think Michael is ready to face the truth, or is he still just beginning his journey of self-discovery? What would you do if you were in his place, facing everything he's going through right now?" The air was thick with tension. Michael felt the moment of truth was approaching, but he still didn't know how the story would unfold. He felt stronger, more prepared to face the reality that was about to be revealed. But at the same time, he knew that deep down, this truth could be more devastating than he imagined. He couldn't go back now. With each passing day, the consequences of his actions and the search for the truth brought him closer to an inevitable confrontation. James was by his side, offering support, but no matter how hard he tried, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was playing a bigger game. His father's secrets, the FBI agent's intervention, it all seemed part of a carefully planned plot. But by whom? What was the real objective of all this? Michael and James had retreated to a safer place outside the city, to an abandoned house, away from the lights and surveillance of the busy streets. Now they had a plan, one last attempt to uncover everything behind their father's involvement in the secret operation. But they needed more information, something that would prove the links between their father, the government, and the mysterious disappearances mentioned in the files. There were many gaps in the story, and they needed to be filled before it was too late. "Are you sure this will work?" James asked, watching Michael with a cautious expression. "I know you're doing this on your own, but we still have to be very careful. We don't know how far this will take us." Michael nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The road ahead was silent, but he sensed the confrontation was near, that at any moment they would be confronted with what fate had in store. He had a clear objective now, to discover why his father had become involved in something so big and dangerous, and what his role would be in it. There would be no more escape. "I know what you're thinking," Michael said, turning to James. "But the truth has already been sealed. There's no going back. I need to understand who we are, who we really are, and why all this happened." Fear was still present, but no longer in a paralyzing way. Michael knew that any answer he found could change the course of his life forever, and perhaps he was no longer prepared to deal with the consequences. But from the moment he decided to face the truth, he couldn't go back. The weight of his decision was on him, but he no longer cared. There was something more important now. Michael took his cell phone from his backpack and called the last person who could still offer more clues about the truth: his mother. She had always been a distant figure, but at some point she knew more than he imagined. There was something about her, some hidden secret that he now needed to uncover. "Hello?" Her voice sounded from the other end of the line with a tone of surprise. "I need to know the truth," Michael said bluntly, "about my father. What was he doing? What did you know?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then his mother's voice answered, this time softer. "Michael, you're not ready to hear this. I tried to protect you. I didn't want you to get involved in this. But I'm already involved, and I need to know what happened, why my father did what he did." Michael shouted, frustration etched in his voice. The mother sighed, and Michael could hear the hesitation in her voice. I can't say everything right now, but you're right, son. Your father was involved in something you can't understand. He made choices that affected more than just our family, and you became a part of it, and perhaps you are the key to solving everything." His mother's words were like a bombshell. The answer was closer than he imagined. He needed to meet with his mother, try to fully understand what she knew, and prepare for what was to come. The future of his life was about to be redefined by what he would finally discover. The FBI agent was still watching them, but he knew she was just another piece in the puzzle. And perhaps she was more willing to help them than he imagined. The tension was mounting, and Michael felt the weight of the inevitable. "James," he said, turning his attention to his friend, "I'm going to see my mother. Will you come with me?" James looked at him hesitantly, but then nodded. "I'll go." But as much as we want to know the truth, we have to be ready for what will happen next. The preparations were complete. Michael and James were about to embark on the final leg of that journey, and the ultimate confrontation with the truth was about to happen. Do you think Michael is ready to face the truth his mother is about to reveal? What should he do after this discovery? Michael and James arrived at their mother's house at dusk. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The silence of the neighborhood contrasted sharply with the turmoil of emotions within Michael. Each step he took toward the door felt heavier than the last. He knew he was about to confront a truth that would change his life forever. His mother opened the door before they could knock. There was weariness in her eyes, but also determination. Michael realized she already knew the confrontation was inevitable. Without further ado, she led them into the living room, where old family portraits seemed to watch their every move. Time seemed to have stood still, and the air was thick with memories and secrets. "Michael, James, sit down," she said, her voice firm but trembling. "It's time for you to understand everything." Michael sat down, feeling his heart race. He knew there was no turning back. His mother began to speak, revealing what he had so feared. His father was not just a man involved in covert operations. He was at the center of a government corruption scheme linked to mysterious disappearances and leaked confidential documents. Each of her words was like a blow, but also like a key unlocking doors, long locked in Michael's mind. "Your father believed he was protecting us all," she continued, "but he ended up becoming part of something bigger, something he couldn't control. And you were always in the right place at the right time, even without knowing it." Michael swallowed hard. Each emotion seemed to overwhelm the other: anger, pain, confusion, but also determination. He realized that running away wouldn't solve anything. He needed to act, not just for himself, but for everyone involved. The responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders, but now he felt ready to bear it. James looked at him, noticing the change. "We're in this together, Michael. No matter what happens, we'll face it to the end." Suddenly, a metallic sound echoed at the front door. The FBI agent entered, but this time without hostility. She held additional documents that further connected the dots of the secret operation. "Michael," she said calmly, "if you don't do something now, many people will suffer. You have the information. It's in your hands to decide how this ends." Michael's gaze met the agent's. For the first time, there was no fear, only clarity. He understood that the point of no return had been reached. Every decision, every action he took now would define not only his future, but the future of everyone around him. He took a deep breath and said, "I will expose the truth, no matter the cost. But I will do it my way, ensuring that no one else is manipulated or harmed." His mother nodded, tears in her eyes. James placed his hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. The FBI agent smiled, as if she finally trusted Michael's choice. He had gathered the files, reviewed the evidence, and planned the safest way to deliver the information to the right authorities without exposing innocent people. As the clock in the room ticked away the time, Michael felt a complete transformation. He was no longer the boy running from justice. He was someone capable of facing the truth, taking responsibility, and fighting for justice, even if the path was dangerous. Every step he had taken, every difficult decision, culminated in that moment. The climax came when Michael finally sent the critical documents to the right channels. He watched as the information spread, knowing the world would never be the same, but that he had made the right choice. The feeling of power and relief was indescribable, but there was also a silent sadness. He knew some relationships would never be restored, that certain truths might hurt, but there was no other way to act. The FBI agent approached and said, "You made the right choice, Michael. The road ahead will still be difficult, but now you're in control." James smiled, a smile that carried hope and recognition. Michael looked out the window, observing the city that had once seemed menacing, now illuminated by the promise of a new beginning. In the end, Michael realized that the truth wasn't just about his father or what happened. It was about himself, about courage, responsibility, and the power to make choices, even when all seemed lost. He had overcome fear, confronted injustice, and discovered that however dark the past, the future could still be built. Do you believe Michael made the right choice in exposing the truth? What would you have done in his place, knowing that many people's lives depended on it? After the revelation and the confrontation, the city was never the same again. Michael saw firsthand the impact of his choices. The truth, however liberating, brought with it a whirlwind of consequences. Some people were brought to justice, others, once again, were lost in the shadows of what was left unsaid. But in the end, Michael knew he couldn't have acted any differently. He distanced himself from the chaos, seeking to rebuild his life, far from the constant pressure of surveillance and fear. But the weight of what had happened would never be forgotten. Looking back, he realized that true liberation lay not only in exposing his father's secrets, but in freeing himself from his own fear of facing the unknown. James, who had been his greatest support, stayed by his side, now closer than ever. Together, they helped to unravel even more layers of what remained of that dark plot, but Michael knew that the fight for the truth would never end. It would be his constant companion, and with it, the responsibility to do what was right. The FBI agent, who was now becoming an ally, said one last thing to Michael before leaving. "The truth you sought, Michael, will continue to be a weapon. Use it wisely, because what you choose to do with it determines the kind of man you will be from now on." Michael didn't answer immediately, but he knew she was right. He had changed, not only because of what he had discovered about his father, but because of how he now faced life and the future. The choices he would make from now on would be guided by the same courage that had led him to that moment. But now he also knew that, however great the truth might be, it couldn't be the only thing to define his life. That day, Michael felt that he could finally move on. The past had been resolved, but the future was still open, a blank canvas waiting for him. Now that the story has come to an end, what do you think the future holds for Michael? How do you believe he will move forward after everything he's been through? Years have passed since that decisive day, and Michael has become a recognized figure, not only as someone who solved a great mystery, but as a defender of truth and justice. He had found peace not only by exposing his father's mistakes, but by learning to deal with the consequences of his choices. Today, he lives a quieter life, but he has never forgotten the most important lesson of all. The truth, however harsh, is the only thing that sets us free. What do you think might happen if Michael decided to confront his past again? Does he have more secrets to hide? Michael's journey has come to an end, but what about yours? What would you do if confronted with a truth that could change your life? Share your thoughts in the comments and share this story with your friends. What have you learned about the courage to face the truth and the challenges of making difficult decisions? Michael's story is just one among many, and yours can be written too. Don't be afraid to face what lies ahead. How did Michael's journey resonate with you? What was the most valuable lesson you took from this story?